All right, you are back. We are live. This is Jack Murphy, and I am here with Matt Braynard, a return guest on the Jack Murphy Live Show. How you doing today, Matt?
Better than Custer. Thanks for having me back.
Better than Custer. Perfect. So we have checked in a couple of times over the last few months here after the election. When I first talked to you, you had just canceled a vacation, disappointed yourself and people around you, and got back to work after the election, trying to figure out what was going on there. And you started the Voter Integrity Project. And you did a lot of great work that we talked about there. And we're going to talk about some of it now, too. But since then, you've gone on to create the Look Ahead America project. And that can be found at lookaheadamerica.org. And we've got a bunch of new initiatives going on there, Matt. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. But let's start right off the bat with Voter Integrity Project. So what's going on there? The last time we checked, I remember Georgia in particular was a very interesting case in that there was quite a number of verifiable, hard data issues around voter. I'm not going to use the words right now because I still want to stay on YouTube here, but discrepancies in the expected outcomes there. Tell us what's been going on with your recent work. Give us an update on the Georgia strategy and the other things that are happening with the Voter Integrity Project, Matt.
Be happy to. So the Voter Integrity Project, in early January, we rolled it in to Look Ahead America, which gives it a lot of benefits because Look Ahead America is operating as a 501c3. We're just waiting final certification from the IRS. And in the meantime, we are allowed to operate as a C3, which is a great place for us to be. The Voter Integrity Project is continuing the mission of trying to restore trust in our elections across a few different efforts. Probably the most prominent one is we are going to be releasing reports on Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, demonstrating, at least in 3 of those states, that we believe there's tremendous evidence that the number of illegally cast ballots surpasses the margins of victory. We initially rolled that data out in November or December. I found that it basically kind of got sidetracked because we became parts of several of the president's and his allies' lawsuits, and that was very time-consuming. And we were also in a situation where we were extremely rushed. We had a very hard deadlines, and typically with a project like this, we need more time, even for lawsuits like that. And what I recall was that in the year 2000 or 2001, after that election, the media put together 3 different groups to investigate the Florida result. They spent millions of dollars, and it took them an additional 7 months to come up with the answer that yes, in fact, George W. Bush did win Florida. So on our end, what we're doing is we're releasing reports where we've gone back over everything that we found, all the evidence of illegal ballots, and fortifying it with research into additional evidence that will better support what we found, because the state has tremendous resources to determine whether or not somebody is actually illegally eligible to cast a ballot. As private citizens, we don't quite have that same access, but we have other tools we're using. So we'll be releasing a report on Georgia on the 22nd, George Washington's birthday, that I think will do a phenomenal job documenting it. We have a research group of about 40 researchers who are trained in doing voter fraud investigation and that kind of thing. And so we will have much better documentation this time, simply because we have more time to put it together. And then we'll be continuing that effort in Wisconsin and Arizona, and a pretty good chance we'll be taking a look at Pennsylvania too. And in each of these states, once we release this report, we'll be rolling it out, making as much noise as possible, and activating our massive army of activists to demand that state legislatures and other governments acknowledge it and then make necessary reforms, because we're not under any illusion that any of our findings could possibly, undo the presidential election, or undo the inauguration, I should say.
There you go. Interesting. Wow, a lot of things just come up there. The totals of, what was the exact phrase that you used? Not fraud.
The number of illegal ballots surpasses the margin of victory, thus making it uncertain who won a certain state. If we are able, and I'm pretty confident we're going to find that 3 of those states I mentioned meet that test, and without those 3 states, the winner of the presidential election then also itself becomes uncertain because of how the Electoral College works.
Now, when you're calculating these votes, or taking a look at these votes and showing which ones illegally cast, is there a partisan slant to that, or are you looking at all of the votes? And so by that, I'm asking, are you discounting illegally cast votes on Trump's behalf and also on Biden's behalf, or are you just looking at one side of it? Is this a net total picture here?
It's a total picture, and when we initially did the VIP, we did about, I'd say, 7 times, like almost 50 analyses across the country in all of the different states, 50 different tests. Exactly one of them had any consideration for party, and that's not something we're even going to necessarily use to demonstrate that ballots were illegally cast. It had something to do with the absentee ballot requests. So we're looking at the entire voter pool, and people can speculate in terms of like where were these illegal ballots cast. Now I want to make a distinction: is that I'm not saying that there were any voters who cast illegal ballots, because let's say you told me you voted, right? That's not proof that you voted. Let's say the state marked your name off as casting a ballot. That also is not proof that you voted. You may recall in the District of Columbia, Project Veritas, this fantastic leader, James O'Keefe, cast a ballot for the Attorney General. He just walked in, gave the Attorney General's name, and cast his ballot. No ID, nothing. So what I'm getting is that we're not actually accusing anybody individually of committing voter fraud or casting a illegal ballot. We're just saying that these are ballots cast in the names of people who should not be entitled to cast them for any number of reasons. Number one, registered illegally at an address that's not an actual residence. Like they'll take a P.O. box and disguise it as an apartment building. Or they've moved out of the state in such a way that costs them the ability to vote in that state, because you need to have residency in the state to vote in it. With some minor exceptions for military, etc. Or they move to another state and they register to vote in that state, or cast a ballot in that state and then cast another ballot back in the target state. So obviously you can't do that. That's a no-no. So those are the primary means. And the thing about this is that you don't have to be an expert in computers or statistical analysis or mathematics to completely get what I'm explaining. And if I gave, in our report, we'll have an appendix for determining whether or not we're going to release it publicly or who to release it to. They will actually list the names and addresses, registration dates, etc., of all the individuals in whom the ballots were cast or in question. But all of this is incredibly accessible. So at no point am I asking you, hey, just trust me, man, if the number's there. This is something that anybody with a elementary school education can grasp, or maybe not even that. So a child can grasp why these ballots are illegal. So I think that's why it's so powerful, and it's I think in many ways the evidence we're providing is incontrovertible.
Right, which is why, Matt, all along the way, you've been the only person I've talked to on the integrity of the election. The only person I've interviewed about whether or not votes were cast illegally or legally. You're the only person's research I've explored, publicized, broadcasted, and shared in. Why? Because it is incontrovertible. Like, these are just facts. This is the way the system works. Either they meet these criteria to be legal, or they don't. And we've looked at all of them, and we're showing you an actual comparison and it's actual data. It is why you're the only one that I've talked to out of this in this entire process.
Well, related, that's kind of you to say. Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, related to this, and we'll see how you handle this question, Matt. What impact on your work, the efficacy of your work, the outcomes it could generate? How was it impacted by being, quote, would you say, caught up in some of the other legal proceedings that were brought on behalf of the president? Lynn Wood stuff, Sidney Powell stuff. How did you got kind of thrown in that mix? Was that a good thing or a bad thing? How do you react to that?
I can spill the tea on that. It was the lesson for me in this is things go much better when the attorneys are working for me rather than when I'm working for the attorneys. And I'll tell you, there was an election related lawsuit that I was involved in where I was in charge, and we won, despite everybody telling us we had no chance, including our own attorneys. I was working for a very ambitious candidate in the state of Idaho, and the Secretary of State there, they were on full COVID-style elections, I think needlessly, was insisting to people that they could still request absentee ballots until a certain date. And they completely messed that up. And rather than the Secretary of State and all the county clerks saying, you know what, we messed this up, people were not able to request absentee ballots the way we said they would be able to, they just shrugged their shoulders and said, well, they could have done it in other ways. Even though in the days leading up to the deadline, the Secretary of State was still going on radio saying, you know, you can still register to vote exactly this way, right? So they botched that. I took the Secretary of State to federal court and I kicked his butt. And they had to they had to extend their deadline, change how they were doing everything regarding the election, and we won. And then we get to this case, and here's part of the problem, and this got a lot of people in trouble. Is that you understand like the evidence that I'm putting together. Like this individual, we took their information, we gave it to the U.S. Postal Service. The U.S. Postal Service said that this person made a permanent move request to another state. Okay, you can understand that. The problem is that a lot of lawyers were taking evidence into court that they didn't have that level of confidence in. They were relying on an expert to tell them that certain things had happened and gone that way, and it was a total trust me bro situation. And I think that flooded out a lot of what we had. And I'll share something else with you. 2 days after the election, I had written this strategy of trying to identify, and these are time-tried, these have been used. We actually used this back in 2000, some of these techniques to identify potentially illegal ballots. I shared that with the campaign. It didn't go anywhere. I tweeted about it out of frustration, and that seemed to explode for some reason. But then I was invited to go down to the campaign headquarters 2 days after the election to help give them some guidance and feedback, to partner with them. Some people inside the campaign wanted me to come in and sort of give them some guidance or cooperate or whatever. I would volunteer. I'll do anything I can do to help you. And I also knew that they had a lot of the data that I needed, that you need to do this analysis. They already had it in hand, right? So it was, I'd say, 10 o'clock at night on Thursday when I get the call, okay, go into the headquarters, because their headquarters is in Northern Virginia, basically D.C. area. So I put on my best suit. I pack up my laptop. I'm ready to go. I've got a bunch of Red Bulls in my backpack. I get there. I stand outside the building waiting for permission to come in. And I'm told that there's a fight happening inside the building about whether or not to let me in. So I waited about an hour before I was told I would not be allowed to come into the campaign's office and give them any support or help. At that point, my wife suggested, well, why don't you try crowdfunding it? And I said I'd crowdfund it. The right has a real grifter problem, so I had to upfront make the promise that no nickel from this was going to go to me, right? And I explained how much I thought it was going to cost. So basically, right off the bat, we had to blow $100,000, and we ultimately blew close to $200,000 on data. And what's sad about that is that not only did it cost money, but it cost time. And that was all data that the campaign and the RNC had in hand from before the election. They had this data. So we had to reacquire it, very expensive, both in terms of finances and time, do it all of ourselves. And then at the end, the campaign and some of the allied legal teams said, okay, we need your stuff. And then basically what happened was the best case we had was in Georgia, and the president conceded before that was able to move forward. And, the legal teams were, at least for the president, were a constant rotating stream of different attorneys. So the attorney I started working with in Georgia moved to the background, and then a new attorney would come forward. A new attorney. By the end, I said, I was saying to the attorneys, look, we've updated some of our information. It's much robust. I want to make a substitute to our expert report appendix. And the attorney in charge said, wait, who are you? But that's the level. That was what was going on. And I'm working on a book, and I've got all kinds of stories to share. But that's just what was going on behind it. So, like I said, things go better when the attorneys are working for me rather than the other way around.
I hear you. I hear you on all that. Thank you for sharing. It has been something that many of us observers have long bemoaned about the Trump candidacy and presidency, inability to get the right people in the right seats, too many of the wrong people all over the place, too many people that I don't think necessarily had the president's agenda or himself or the country as a priority. I think I can read some of the tea leaves here on what you're saying. I certainly know what it means when you're talking about who's in charge, the lawyers or the client. I understand that. The lawyers seem to have been pushing a lot of what's happening, cracking stuff.
Right. And I actually, here's the funny thing, is that I wasn't part of that, the Powell lawsuit. What they did is they took basically a screenshot of one of my tweets and basically shoehorned that into their mountain of evidence. And there's I think some really negative consequences, but the worst of which is that whatever difference could have been made just evaporated. I mean, I actually was invited by state legislator to go testify at the hearing in Michigan, and they brought different. They basically decided to let the campaign decide who was going to testify, and I had mounds of evidence of potentially illegal ballots. I had recordings because we ran a phone center to follow up with people and asked, did you really cast a ballot? Did you request an absentee ballot? And we had recordings of people telling us that they, ballots in their name, completely matched to their name and their phone number. They didn't cast those ballots. And we were never allowed to testify in Michigan with this data. I understand they had a time constraint, but considering whom they did bring to testify in Michigan, so that is sad because it was a Tea Party group that helped fund me to go to Michigan. They paid for that trip. And so I was heartbroken because that's not cheap for activists. Activists aren't rolling in at like millionaires and billionaires, as Bernie Sanders would say. So I just went back to my hotel room and I just recorded my own testimony as I would have given it. And it's just unfortunate. And as more information comes out about how badly things were managed, I think it'll open people's eyes to what could have been.
I am involved in a number of DC groups, insiders, high-level people talking strategy, making plans and whatever. And I was struck by how hard they had swallowed the Kraken line and the voting machine lines and the Powell stuff and this Venezuela crap and international conspiracies and servers abroad and whatever. All garbage. Maybe you can prove it to me one day, folks, but all garbage. The only data we're dealing with here is the data that Matt has unearthed. And and I'm talking to those people right now, not you, Matt. If we would have just listened to this guy right here and stopped screwing around with all that other crap, we might have made some real progress. But it's the same symptom, the wrong people in the wrong places, the right people nowhere to be seen, a bunch of people leading the president astray. And what's very fascinating to me about your work in this case is you sprung into action to defend the integrity of the election. And it was a network that came up around the president, around this idea, this hope that we could have a president with America First agenda who was not going to bow to the uniparty and all that stuff. And that's sort of how he got launched in the first place. And it may be how we launch the next guy who's going to be able to carry forth an agenda like this. So I appreciate the spirit of the action that you took. No one told you to do it. No one. In fact, they didn't even not ask you. They made it hard for you, right? And that's the part that's even the most frustrating is if you're not going to engage the guy. I'm talking to those people again now. If you're not going to engage Matt, at least don't make it harder for him. So these are questions that I have. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of good stories in your book. I'm interested to read that as soon as it's ready, and we can certainly talk about all of that. But instead of lamenting sort of what's done is done at this point, let's move on to a little bit about what you're doing in the future. First, just by the way, thank you very much for all that. Truly.
You're too kind. Thank you.
Where are we going here? Where are we going? The Voter Integrity Project has turned into Look Ahead America, more or less, shorthand. And Look Ahead America has got a number of initiatives. Let's talk about a couple of them, Matt. What are you excited about there at Look Ahead America?
Well, we've got a lot of irons in the fire. And what's on the front burner right now is, you're talking about the future, what do we do next? It's exactly in the name. And that's sort of where the name Look Ahead America comes from, because when I started this organization, I recognized that the patriotic right, the America First right, first, it wasn't getting very much attention. There was no organization operating within that space. But also that in politics, even particularly on the right, we're always focused on what's happening in the moment. We're always reacting, whereas the left forever has had plans that I think span a century. Things like their current universal health care strategy. That was born 100 years ago, and they've been working on it patiently and diligently. You can look at the left's aggressive voter registration efforts. they suffered through some rough times. They suffered through Trump's election. They suffered through losses of Congress over and over again. But they persisted with an agenda of aggressive voter registration and turning people out. So they've always been sort of focused on the future and what really matters. And nobody on our side has ever done that. And that's really what Look Ahead America philosophically is about trying to anticipate these problems. I'll be honest with you, is that I tried starting this group 4 years ago, trying to get it off the ground. We were founded by 30 former Trump campaign staffers. And the reason was because every year I was looking at the numbers and I was seeing that the left was out-registering, with progressives in particularly urban areas, out-registering, I would say, patriotic voters, conservatives. And that troubled me. And I would go to this big meeting in D.C., and I'm sure you know many of the people at this meeting. It happens once a week. I'm sure you know the meeting I'm talking about. And every January, I would go into that meeting. This was during Trump's his years in office, and I would do a PowerPoint and show them all the key states and all the newly registered progressive voters and all the newly registered patriotic voters, as best we were able to ID them. And sometimes we would just report partisan numbers because that was more straightforward. And over again, every year, those numbers and the margins got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I'd do that meeting, and then no one would follow up, no one would ask a question, but they were very excited about whatever was hot and sexy in the moment that seemed to catch people's attention, or sadly, what drove donations. Because especially low-dollar donors, they see something on television, they get very excited about it because it's very immediate and impactful. I don't know, you could just pick any hot story of the moment. But ultimately, that is not going to matter. Ultimately, a year later, you're not even going to remember. I can't even remember what the momentary hot topic was a year ago. But what is always important is the voter registration efforts. That that is a permanent thing. And the way I like to see it is, there are a lot of folks writing huge checks like PACs and campaigns, etc. That money gets burnt instantly on things like Super Bowl ads, completely forgettable. And at best, what they're aiming to do is to buy a vote, basically convince somebody to vote for one candidate one time. Now you compare that to what Look Ahead America is doing. We're investing in voters, not a vote, creating, educating, and turning out new voters. And the relative impact of that compared to, say, just buying TV ads or throwing $1 million on Zuckerberg's platform, making him even wealthier, where it just basically goes through your system like that, in and out, like a goose. It's incomparable, the value difference. So that's really what Look Ahead America started as, and that's an area we're returning. But what we were also doing now is building an army of activists and training them and giving them guidance. So we've got policy guidance now on how to fix our elections, how to solve all of the problems that we saw in the past, and all of the alleged problems. So we've rolled out policy initiatives on how to fix our elections, and tomorrow night we're going to train people on how to lobby and organize at their county level and at their state level to make an impact. And then we'll be reaching out to them with state-level coordinators to organize them on how to work collectively. Because honestly, if just one person goes to their state legislature and says, I have a problem, not likely going to listen. But if you show up with your whole neighborhood, they can't ignore you anymore. And I think that's the way forward for our country, is because so many on the right, I keep hearing, I'm never going to vote again. The system's corrupt, there's fraud, etc. And the problem with voter fraud is when it happens, it impacts elections, right? But the other problems are that it demoralizes the party that loses and makes them think that their votes don't matter, which makes it even easier for their opponents to win. Because if they can just demoralize you enough because you think that everything is broken and corrupt, then, in theory, there's not even a need to cast illegal ballots anymore. You've already given up. They've won. And I think the part of the way we find our way back is we have to restore trust, and part of that is through these initiatives that we're putting forward for reform. We'd be happy to talk to you about them, but I know we do plugs at the end, but I encourage everybody in your audience to go to lookaheadamerica.org and register for our free training session tomorrow night. And one of the speakers will be Congressman Matt Gaetz, who will be talking to us about how important our work is. And we've got 6 lecturers who are going to take you through everything. So if you know nothing about how to do any of this, we'll hold your hand, we'll be very gentle, and we'll take you carefully along the way to make sure you understand, and then we'll put you to work.
What time is that, and where do people find out? Where do they get this training on how to lobby?
It's at 8 p.m. on Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern to 10:30 p.m. Eastern. It's at lookaheadamerica.org. There's a big red bar at the top of the page that takes you to the place to register, and that's kind of it. And then you show up. We're doing it on Zoom. I know some people have issues with Zoom, but there's nothing where it would not trouble me at all if the Chinese Communist Party watched our entire lecture. I would put it that, or whoever else happens to watch it. So,
right. Well, Matt, this is why I like talking to you, man. You see the big picture. You understand the policy. You know the politics, unfortunately. And you want to take action. You take action when nobody asks you to, when it needs to be. You step up and take action when you see a need. And I admire that. And I like that. And I love people that engage that energy, masculine energy, build, create, take action, defend, protect, instruct. You're doing all of them right here. And that's why I want to, try to help spread this message. So guys, go down to lookaheadamerica.org. Check out the policy prescriptions that they've come up with to remedy the issues that Matt and his team have uncovered in the last election. And don't let 2020 demoralize you into not voting. Let it spur you into further action. That is what is necessary here. And Matt, I'm going to take just a second to rant. Matt is not wrong when he talks about the long game on the left, guys. We've talked about this a lot. They have taken over all of our institutions. They've captured everything. The government, deep state, military, academia, the media, all of our corporations, your local institutions, your art institutions, everything. And they didn't do it overnight. It took a long time, decades, generations, commitment to the cause. And we're seeing the fruit, the fruits of their labor here. We have to do something else. We cannot just be reactive. We can't just be preventing, slowing this slide. We have to take action, and that's what I love about this. And the next part in your sort of portfolio here, not only is identifying the correct policy to move forward, training the people on how to spur grassroots, projects and energy into change. But then, this is probably the most 2021 of it all, is creating a network, an emergent network of associated, affiliated states and localities that see the world the same way. So let's talk about the Free Speech States initiative that you guys have launched. I love this. I think this is the future. I think this is part on theme of decentralizing all of our, just in general, the decentralization theme in life, in the world, strategic disconnection. I think that this is right on point. So tell us about the Free Speech States and what the plan is there and how we're going to roll this out forward.
Right. So you pointed out that, at least in Washington, D.C., the patriotic cause is kind of at a low point. We don't have a lot of supporters. We don't have a lot of power. One place we have tremendous power is in the state legislature, and that's for two reasons. First of all, because I'd say that a majority of the state legislatures are in the hands of people who are either very favorable to America First and patriotic causes, or standing shoulder to shoulder alongside us. The second reason, though, is that when you're an individual and you're trying to organize, good luck getting your congressman's attention or your senator's attention. It's incredibly difficult. But with a little bit of hard work and some elbow grease, you can definitely get your state legislature's attention and your state senator's attention. And those two things combined are why we're encouraging many of our activist supporters and volunteers to engage at the state level in different projects. So we spoke briefly about our new initiative on ensuring voter integrity reform. But another big issue that's been impacting those on the America First right is corporate censorship. And that comes in all kinds of forms. It comes from social media censoring you. It comes from technology platforms blacklisting you. It comes from, or deplatforming you. It comes from financial institutions blacklisting you, basically trying to shut you down for engaging in what is essentially legal activity, legal First Amendment activity that passes the town square test, which is a great test because it's a long-held test by the Supreme Court and other subsequent courts and legislatures in terms of what's permitted in a town square. And our take, here's a very simple principle. Principle is that while these businesses, many of them international global businesses with no loyalty to any country, are entitled to control what speech happens on their platforms. They're not entitled to government contracts paid for by taxpayers whom they are denying these First Amendment rights. So it's a very simple principle. If you are a platform that chooses to censor free speech that meets the town square test standard, then you're not entitled to get any government contracts. The state will not do business with you. So that comes in, well, let's consider social networks. A state will not spend money on social networks for marketing or advertising or anything else if that social network censors legal First Amendment speech. They will not contract with any corporation that deplatforms somebody for legal speech. So, if you go to any state capital in the country and you look around at some of the buildings that surround it, you look at the names that are on those buildings. Those are corporations you recognize. They aren't there because it's a wonderful city. Trust me, Columbia, South Carolina is a dump. They are there to lobby that state government for billions of dollars in contracts. And we have the power to turn that faucet off. We have the power to say that they're not going to do any financial transactions with financial institutions that fires employees or kicks people off their platform for engaging in legal business and legal speech. Now, the state legislature can do this very easily by passing legislation. So that within 1 year, we're not going to be permitted to do anything to do any business with any of these institutions that engage in corporate censorship. And then one of two things is going to happen. Either these corporations are going to say, you know what, we really need those government contracts. Our shareholders would be upset if we weren't able to, get that revenue. So we're just going to go ahead and allow legal First Amendment speech on our platform, even if we disagree with it. Okay, and that standard of disagreement has increasingly become lower and lower and lower to what you're not allowed to say anymore. And I won't get into that because I don't want to get you kicked off wherever you're distributing this. So either they're going to do that, or they're going to say, no, take a hike. Who cares? It's just South Carolina and Oklahoma. We don't really need that money. But what happens is that those government services have to be created. That money has to be spent, and it's going to create a space for corporations to go after those contracts that are committed to the First Amendment. And that will be, I think, the seed money for creating a new ecosystem of social media networks, technology companies, and financial institutions that are committed to First Amendment rights. And that will create this parallel ecosystem, which I think will be incredibly threatening to the old powers that be. I'm not going to name check anybody, but you know exactly the social networks, the technology platforms, and the financial institutions I'm talking about.
Indeed. I love this idea. When I hear about people trying to organize boycotts on an individual basis against the corporations, I totally appreciate the sentiment. I don't think it's effective, simply just because it's too hard to rally enough people in such a way to make a dent on the corporations. But one thing that we have seen where you can rally people with, if they have extra money, is Wall Street bets. So we've seen collective action there actually have an impact on, attacking a hedge fund or at least roiling the markets a little bit. What you're proposing is even one step up. It's even better than that. It's a beautiful thing because these state and local budgets, when we get a network of them together, that's actually real money. That's actually real money. That's actually going to make a difference if it evaporates off of the P&L of these big corporations. And if they see a trend in place, they're going to want to stop it. If they see 27, 28, 30 states and localities deciding to divert their money elsewhere, that's a big deal. That is a big deal. And what I love about this idea is that it unites a lot of contemporary issues all at once. One, how do we deal with free speech issue on social media? This is a great idea. This is a way to move forward. Connect your government spending to the preservation of the rights enumerated in the Constitution. Somehow, this is a crazy idea. It's out of left field. It's nuts. But it's actually perfectly in line with the spirit of the country and the spirit of the laws. Why would our own government support institutions that run contrary to the rights enumerated in our Constitution? It just doesn't make any sense.
Right, and this is really about strategy. You have to go to where you have power, and you have to leverage it. Where we have power now is in the state legislatures. and their budgets. So we're leveraging our power to influence what those state legislatures do, not just on this issue, but also on voter integrity. And there are some other issues that are going to come down the pike, whereas as we become better organized in the states, we'll be making a presence felt of America First patriotic activists. And, it's a very simple principle, is that, I'm a taxpayer of this government. If this institution is censoring me, I don't want my tax dollars going to them. It's not stepping on anybody's freedom or First Amendment rights. It's fine. And this is not unprecedented, because there are many state governments that put limits on what their contractors can do. Now, you may recall California, I think, forbid any of their state government or contractors from traveling to Indiana because they didn't want to let creepy guys into the ladies' bathroom. So
Right. And, I've heard a number of organized state boycotts of countries like, say, Israel, for example, or other places try to impact, foreign affairs and such. I want to make a parallel here to something that is already happening in the United States. Decentralizing away from federal authority is a trend that's in place. We've seen it for a long time with states, especially around cannabis decriminalization. States are just like, hey, the feds aren't moving. We're going to go in the direction we want to go. Come and do something about it, right? So there's a collection of states that have risen up and decided to take action. There's a collection of states that have decided, and counties and localities that decided they're not going to engage with the, federal immigration enforcement. So they've created sanctuary cities for immigration, and they are decentralizing their power away from the federal government. There was a time recently in Virginia and West Virginia where there were laws proposed that were going to infringe mightily on the Second Amendment in Virginia. And there were a network of counties that emerged that said, we're not going to put up with this. We're moving in a different direction. Come and get us if you think this is a problem. I can see this emergent network phenomenon here of let's get states and localities together that see this thing the same way, that believe that the central government isn't handling it properly, take power into our own hands, guide our money in the right direction. But the essential component here is it can't just be one county or one city or one state. It has to be a network of states. So to the extent this is going to be effective, obviously, you're going to need some real coordination, I think, among the states in an emergent way. So what you're doing is you're laying it out. You're sort of open sourcing the code. And you're saying, hey, states, localities, activists, here's the plan. Engage this plan. And if we engage this plan together, we can make change. We can get the legislatures and the states and localities to make change. Hopefully this change will be direct your money away from corporations that infringe upon our rights in the United States. And in time, that can have a national impact on all these issues that we care mightily about. So kudos to you. Brilliant strategy. Perfect for the time. Perfect for what we need to do. And that's why I'm here talking to you about it and wanting to get this message out as far and wide as we can. How can we help you, Matt? How can we help you do this? I believe in everything you're doing. Build, create, protect, provide, instruct. You're doing all those. These are core values in liminal order, by the way. And then tapping into the network phenomenon and guiding our dollars. How do we help you?
Well, I hate that it has to come to this, but one of our biggest limiting factors is budget. As an organization, we have so far raised about $150,000. I'm not on payroll right now. I'd like to be at some point. But so much of our efforts requires basically full-time professional expertise. And right now we have one employee. I think within the next couple of months we'll have 2 or 3. But we need financial help, because the thing is, one of the things we're engaging in, our bread and butter is RET program, Register, Educate, and Turn Out to Vote. I have a database of millions of Americans who are patriotic, who sympathize with our causes, but they're not registered to vote. And millions more who are registered to vote, but just don't show up to the polling place. This program is geared to solve that problem, because there's no state where, almost no state, where if this demographic was not engaged, or if they were engaged, that they wouldn't be determinative in the outcome of every election. They have all of the power. They're just not, they don't know that they have it. They aren't organized. They aren't activated. And we need to go in and do that. And that is a very expensive process. The left, however, has folks like Zuckerberg, folks like Tom Steyer and other billionaires, dropping literally hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 4 years to register, educate, and turn out their voters. On our side, we have almost nothing, no effort, nothing like that. So, like I said, it's very expensive. So we definitely need contributions so I can build out our staff, so we can deploy field offices and start doing this hard community organizing effectively is what it is. And to also have staff to guide our activist volunteers to pass these state level initiatives to help citizens have their voice recognized in their state capital. All of that costs money, and that's the biggest hurdle we have right now. So if anybody's moved to make a contribution, you can do that by credit card at lookaheadamerica.org. But I hate to I hate to have to ask for that, but that's ultimately what is our limiting factor right now.
Guess what, Matt? I'll ask on your behalf. I'm going to make a donation today, lookaheadamerica.org. And I want all my guys in the LO and I want all my listeners out there and viewers to make a donation as well, even if it's just $5. Get some money in the pockets of these guys. They are aligned. Folks, Matt and his team and his ideas and his strategies are not only aligned with the times, they're aligned with us. We're aligned with them. This is about policy, action, and networks. Matt is doing all three, and he's very well suited for this work and to be in this position. And I appreciate the fact, Matt, that you handled yourself with integrity and class through the whole sort of election to Jan 6th time period there. I know it must have been very difficult for you. I can only imagine how frustrating some of those moments must have been. To feel like that you're putting forth an enormous amount of selfless effort and not have it be appreciated or respected, but really at worst, you put into practice and utilized in a way that could have been helpful for the country, not to mention the president and the people who were hanging on to his coattails and steering him in the wrong direction. I look forward to hearing more of the tea behind all of that drama. But suffice to say, I'm unsurprised to hear that the lawyers were wagging the dog of the president at that point, and no wonder it didn't go anywhere good. But Matt, you are on the right track, sir. I really appreciate it. I love talking to you. I think that you guys are doing great work, and I want to support you. Lookaheadamerica.org. I'm making a donation right as I get off this live stream. I urge everyone else to do it. And go down there, also sign up for their email list and just get involved. Matt, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you'll be back in another couple months to give us a good update as to your progress. And I look forward to I'm going to attend your training thing tomorrow night as well. So please, guys, check that out. His activist training tomorrow night. It is at 8 p.m. Eastern. Lookaheadamerica.org. Matt, thank you very much. It's free.
So, yep, totally free.
It is totally free. Matt, have a great day, sir. Thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for listening to this special edition episode of Jack Murphy Live. Subscribe to the channel here. Hit like, share it, spread the news. This is a worthy cause here. Let's get the information out. Also, follow me on Twitter at Jack Murphy Live. And if you're interested in the liminal order, come down, check it out, liminal-order.com. Join the mailing list. I'll see you there. Matt Braynard, until the next time, keep up the good work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.